अच्छा प्रोफेसर बासु जॉइन करछन्ती कि देखिल हैं रेणु मैडम अच्छा अच्छा एनीवे ही may join. I think with all your permission we should now start. This is the time.
Sure.
Very hearty welcome to all the participants and the speaker of this 14th distinguished lecture series. And it is being jointly organized by INA Bhubaneswar chapter along with SOA University and IIMT Bhubaneswar. Since ours is a very small chapter here, we are jointly trying to do something. And it started in December. And so far, we have organized 13 such lectures. And today is actually 14th one and third in this month itself. From next month onwards, we definitely propose to have 2 lectures in a month. So, and the lecture, as we know, is meant for the faculty, researcher, and the fellows of INA, not only in this part of the country, but throughout the country, anybody who actually wishes to join. Sometimes we also have some participation from other countries, both as a speaker as well as also as they really join this lecture to listen. So I'm very happy today that we have with us Professor Gopalan Jagadeesh, one of the very renowned persons in aerodynamics field from IISc Bangalore. So, Professor Jagadeesh is currently a faculty in the Department of Aerospace Engineering, IISc Bangalore. He is the founder, chairman of Center of Excellence in Hypersonics at IISc Bangalore. He is also the founder director of a Superwave Technologies Private Limited, a company formed with the equity participation of IISc Bangalore. And its objective is to commercialize several of his discoveries related to shock waves. Professor Jagadeesh is one of the leading researcher in hypersonic aerodynamics and shock wave propagation in complex fluids, which are the most advanced fields of research relevant to space, defense, and terrestrial applications. He has published over 300 papers in peer-reviewed international journals, conferences, and edited 3 books. He has 25 patents on various discoveries related to shock waves and hypersonic flow control. He is currently the president of the International Shockwave Institute, and he is also the Society for Shockwaves Research in India. He is a fellow of the prestigious Royal Aeronautical Society of UK, Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore, National Academy of Engineering, and Associate Fellow of American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics. He has been bestowed with large number of awards in recognition of his professional achievements. Professor Jagadeesh is also passionate about spreading scientific temper, especially among the rural children, and has interacted with over 500,000 high school and college students in India till date to propagate the benefits of shockwave research and spirit of innovation. Really a great job which Professor Jagadeesh has been doing. Now today, of course, he will be speaking on a topic. The topic is very interesting, shocking yet true. So, and this is actually all related to shock waves. The phenomenon of shock waves has been historically associated with aerospace engineering and in particular with supersonic flight shock waves. Shock waves appear in nature also when different elements in the fluid approach each other with a velocity higher than the velocity of the sound in that media. These waves are also generated in massive energy dissipation which takes place at ultra short time. Example, like let us say massive explosions. So Professor Jagadeesh in his laboratory, which is actually known as Laboratory for Hypersonic Shock Waves Research in IISc Bangalore, has created many methods and techniques of generating the shock waves of specific strength for different purposes, and he has extensively used them not only in the aerospace related industries applications, but also encouraged other faculty in IISc from physics, chemistry, materials engineering, etc., to utilize these shock waves in diversified field, including the healthcare field. And that the healthcare, interestingly, the healthcare applications include, non-intrusive needless vaccine delivery, and also cell transformation, wound healing, biofilm destructions, sandal oil extraction, polyphenol enrichment in tea, then metal texture modifications, etc., to name a few. Professor Jagadeesh will give us definitely a glimpse of what all he has done in this interesting area. And since this particular series of lecture is being jointly organized by SOA and IMMT, I will now request our Pro Vice Chancellor. Our Vice Chancellor is actually in Delhi. I will request our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor P.K. Nanda, to say a few words about our university SOA, and then we'll definitely request Director of IMMT Bhubaneswar, if he is present, Professor Sudhasatto Basu, to say a few words about his institute. And that will request Professor Jagadeesh to give his interesting lecture. Professor Nanda, please.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Esteemed guest today, the speaker, Professor Jagadeesh Gopalan, who is a very eminent person in his field, and our esteemed chairman of the advisory board, as well as the chairman of the INE Bhubaneswar chapter, Professor Damodara Acharya, and all the distinguished INE members, faculties, professors, students, those who are attending this meeting. It's quite gratifying to know about the splendid contribution of Professor Jagadeesh in the field of shockwaves and all. It will be interesting to listen to him. About our university, I'll just share couple of words with Professor Jagadeesh. This is a very young university. It started with the institute as an institute in 1995 and 96. 25 years it is actually the institute, and it became university for last 15 years, deemed to be university. And this year we have all, I think, to share that we have achieved good ranking in NIR ranking. We are 20th in the we are the 30th in the all institute category, and we are 16th in the university category. And our engineering institute is 27th. Our medical science actually occupied a position 18th position, and dental is 10th in the country, and law is 9th position in the country. This is our NIRF ranking this year. And we also figured in QS World University ranking last year in 800 to 1000 bracket, and QS Asia 400 to 450 bracket. QS IGOS, it is a diamond rating university. Even the Times Higher Education also we have figured in 1200 plus university ranking. And our engineering and health science, medical science is 600 plus bracket in the THE ranking. And therefore we have achieved substantially within this short period, but nevertheless we have a long way to go. We have 1385 faculties. We have 10 disciplines, 10 institutes, 10 disciplines, ranging from engineering, medical science, science, and humanities, law, hotel management, in fact, agriculture science, and dental science, nursing, hotel management, pharmacy, biotech, management science. And this year you have added Institute of Veterinary Science. So these are the institutes we have, and we have currently 14,000 students, out of which 1100 students are PhD scholars, 534 are full-time scholars, and rest are part-time scholars. So we have a huge pool of students we have inducted recently, so that we'll have a good research ecosystem. We have filed more than 300 patents during last 5 years, but 24 have been granted and 9 designs have been registered. So this is about in short about our achievement. And during COVID-19 particularly, our university contributed substantially to the state of Odisha. We could cater to more than 30,000 patients in COVID, and we had 2,635 beds and 5 hospitals spread across different districts of Odisha, and particularly also the main hospital as at our Bhubaneswar. So this is well appreciated by the government of Odisha and government of India. And we have well connected to the society through different activities, through different camps, clubs, and through different helping the area with the downtrodden and the marginalized people, and through various schemes of our university. We have also a environment and climate center for environment climate, which is actually predicting the day-to-day weather forecasting as well as lightning prediction for a precautionary measure for the farmers or for the people of Odisha particular. And that is also well accepted by the government of Odisha. We have 13 research centers, 58 research labs, besides other UG and other usual laboratories for the students. So we have with this achieved this, and we have a long way to go. And I think we are focusing now on collaborations. We have many collaborations. I think 74 collaborations, out of which many are international, and we are trying to activate all collaboration nationally and internationally. With this a few words, I think thank you, Professor Jagadeesh Gopalan, to agree to deliver a lecture on our chapter, which is jointly organized by our university and IMMT and INA chapter. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Professor Basu, are you present? I think Professor Basu, the director of IMMT, he may be actually busy somewhere because he is also in charge director of actually Central Fuel Research Institute.
Sir has not joined, sir.
Okay, thank you. So now I'll request Professor Jagadeesh to make his presentation. It will be followed by question and answer to be coordinated by Professor Renu Sharma, and she will also propose a formal vote of thanks. Professor Jagadeesh, please.
Thank you very much, sir. So it's such a pleasure and honor to present some of the work that we have been doing in Indian Institute of Science. I am also very happy to note wonderful work that is happening at your SOA University. Let me share my screen. Able to hear? There's a lot of noise, background noise.
Shushmita Tripathi, madam, please mute yourself.
Yes. You able to see the screen, sir, or should I share it again?
We are able to see.
Oh. Good. So you're able to see and you're able to hear me, right?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Good evening. So I will not try to bore you with too many details, but then I'll take you through a glimpse of what we have been doing. And what is very heartening is you spoke about veterinary institute, healthcare, dental science, medical school, engineering, agriculture. So surprisingly, or rather shockingly, Shockwave has actually found application in every one of those areas that you just mentioned. So maybe by the time I close this presentation, there would be some interest in people to look at this fascinating world of shockwaves. What you see in the current slide is the photograph of Indian Institute of Science taken by one of our students in a drone. And you can actually see a small bent portion here and a tower of IAC above that. So this is in fact very much similar to a photograph that you see on the right-hand side, which is what you would see when there is an explosion, that you see a small line here, which is actually the blast wave. And this is usually considered as very dangerous. Not just considered, it can be very deadly and dangerous because these waves are really capable of creating havoc. But then I will show you how over the period of last couple of decades in IAC, we have made them very relevant to every branch of science and engineering. Before I proceed further, it is my solemn duty to pay my humble pranams to the founding fathers of this great institution called Indian Institute of Science. I don't get really tired of narrating this story to any forum, but then I'll be very short, very brief here, except to tell you that I am sure that you would be in a position to recognize one of the greatest sons of modern India, Jamshedji Nusurwanji Tata, and one of the greatest Hindu monks that we have had, Swami Vivekananda. In fact, the original letter written by J.N. Tata to Swami Vivekananda was located and properly archived during our centenary year, which is 2009, where the conversation between J.N. Tata and Swami Vivekananda appears to have galvanized the resolve of J.N. Tata to set up this institution. But unfortunately, both of them, they were no more by the beginning of the 20th century, which is 1909 of that order. Then the thought that they really had for this nation, which is yet to be born, because we were under the British rule at that point in time, but still the thought was so powerful, it actually had enough momentum picked up in later years by Padamsha, who was the secretary of J.N. Tata, and Sister Nivedita, who was also a big devotee who happened to come from England, and the Diwan of the then Mysore kingdom, Sheshadri Iyer. Together with them, they actually crystallized, and IAC was born in 1909. But this photograph I'm very fond of showing you. This is something which many of you would not know. This is the portrait of Queen of Mysore in those days, called Kempa Rajamani Vani Vilas Sannidhana. It's a slightly long name. But that lady was so great that she had lost her husband, and the Nalvadi Krishnaraj Vadairu, who is a very well-known king of Mysore, he was only about 5 or 6 years old. And she was the one who actually donated the entire land of close to 422 acres to IAC. And this queen was so noble that she had pledged her jewelry to build the Krishnaraj Sagar Dam, which is again very well known in Mysore. So it's a very wonderful legacy. When J.N. Tata died, he divided his property into 2 parts. And we still get rent from certain properties which are in the name of IAC, from which are located in Nariman Point, Mumbai. But I would draw your attention to what Mahatma Gandhi mentioned in the Mamair, because he visited IAC in 1927. Some of you would recognize Sir C.V. Raman in the background, and Mahadev Desai, who was the secretary. And Mahatma Gandhi very clearly says that unless all your discoveries that you make have the welfare of the poor at the end view, in fact, he goes on to say all your workshop would be really like a Satan's workshop. And he quotes Rajagopalachari, the first Governor General of India, and he jokingly mentioned that you should actually contribute to the society. And that is something very heartening to note, the work done by your university during COVID. I mean, that is the real purpose of life. I also would like to highlight here, although in recent times we have been talking about entrepreneurship, innovation, so on and so forth, the soap making formula for this Mysore sandal soap, which is a very famous soap coming out of Karnataka, which is actually exported in huge quantity. This factory is located at about 2 kilometers from IAC. And the patent for this was incidentally from Professor J.C. Bose, who was the founder of IIT Kharagpur. It was from the chemistry department. And in the 1930s, around 38 to be precise, this patent was sold for about 9 rupees, about 50 annas in those days, which means patents have been happening in this country, innovations have been thriving in this country for a very long time. So again, I take this opportunity to record my humble salutation to this wonderful institution, which was actually because of private philanthropy, magnanimity of a kingdom, and a thought leader when we were still under the British rule, and IAC was born in the year 1909. I have always wondered that people really use these terminologies like basic science, technology, and engineering in a very, very loose sense. I have always regarded basic science as almost like Brahma Deva, who is the originator or creator. And science is always about new information, new knowledge, path-breaking ideas, or in some simple terms, it is about understanding the nature, the external nature. But engineering is something where you act as a bridge between the basic science and then try to interpret and see how this is useful to us. And then you have several avatars like how Narayana would do. I've just borrowed the analogy from Hindu mythology, just for the sake of simplicity. But then technology is more like Shiva. The day a new technology is born, it is bound to die. But in recent time, what is very interesting that has happened is the emergence of, I have just put Goddess Saraswati here to denote knowledge. And I have also put Lord Krishna's famous photograph where he seems to have opened his mouth, wherein all the 40 in the entire universe was seen by Yashoda. And that actually corresponds to the big data. But the explosion of knowledge and data is actually driving Industry 5.0, where the human is actually acquiring a center stage. People are now trying to understand how human brain works. And we have come back a full circle, starting from, say, maybe monkey to Homo sapien. And this wonderful culmination of fundamental science, basic engineering, leading to technology, new knowledge becoming a power, and the new information really propelling nation is a very, very exciting time to be around. In fact, it won't be an understatement to say today that in the next 20 years, or probably even in 10 years, you will see so many new technologies that this world has not seen in the last 300 years. So we are all blessed to be around in this area. It is in this background I talk about what I call as a shock wave. This is certainly not something to do with electric shock, or this is also not the shock that people usually get when they are very disappointed. But then I am talking about something which is purely mechanical phenomena. In fact, the earliest known history of shock wave is from Britain, where for the first time, the aeroballistic people, Benjamin Robbins, was able to quantitatively measure the velocity of a moving bullet. And that bullet was actually traveling at about 500 meters per second. And usually Mach number is a number which people denote. Anything which is above the speed of sound is usually regarded as Mach number 1, and 1 is equal to speed of sound. So anything which goes above speed of sound, we call it a subsonic, and if it goes beyond the speed of sound of about 5 or 6, we call it as hypersonics. And incidentally, now hypersonic is one of the most hot areas around the world, especially after Chinese have demonstrated their new missile, which is not at this current technology. No radar will be able to detect certain things. So shock waves have been around from 1746, so it's not something very new. But what is very new is in the last 20, 30 years, we have been able to see the real impact of a mechanical wave like this, utilize the momentum and the energy that is embedded in those waves to do all kinds of interesting phenomena, interesting application, including doing removal of kidney stone without surgeries, removal of biofilms, putting a DNA inside a film, all kinds of very exciting things are happening. In fact, just to be a little bit more on fundamental physics, just to tell you what these shock waves are. Normally, when I am speaking, you are able to, of course, hear that through the internet today. But the sound waves are the one which are actually producing these kind of different oscillatory sounds which you are able to hear. And whenever I speak or whenever a person speaks, and as sound waves travel and the velocity, usually the particle oscillation is, the collision frequency is typically about 10 to the power of 8 hertz under normal circumstances. Now, if moment your intensity of sound basically increases, then the energy cannot be dissipated at the same rate. And as a result, you have compression and rarefaction, which keeps happening. And this is something which is known in physics. But after a certain time, when the energy dumped becomes very large, then the sound propagation velocity, which is about 340 meters per second, is not able to dissipate that energy. Then it starts accumulating and it starts getting compressed in a very small volume. And the moment that forms, we usually say that that is the starting point of shock wave. But unlike your sound wave, shock wave is actually a misnomer because it cannot have a frequency which could be in hertz, because you have to spend substantial energy to create a shock wave. In some sense, it's a mechanical disturbance which is more like a transient. But then the energy embedded in that could be quite very interesting. So you could simply say that these are mechanical waves of certain finite amplitude, and you can generate them in any media. And yes, you need a medium to generate them. And compared to acoustic waves, whenever shock waves travel through a medium, there's a massive change in the characteristics of the propagating medium. Yes, of course, because of the molecules being very closely packed, the sound waves, the shock waves would travel the fastest in solids, a little slower in liquid, slowest in air. And then always whenever they travel in a medium, you will have sharp rise in pressure, sharp rise in temperature, all of that happening in a very, very narrow time scale of the order of few microseconds. In fact, in a layman's term, if I were to say, for example, have an apple and vacuum pack that and expose that to shock wave, it would remain apple from outside, but I can actually put a straw and drink the juice. So we have done those experiments and patented those kind of technologies. And a balloon burst or a cracker burst can create a sharp rise in pressure like this, what you're seeing in this particular pellet on the right-hand side. But for aerospace people, any fighter aircraft, any body that travels beyond the speed of sound, the occurrence of these waves are quite natural. And for us, we need to know the distance between the vehicle and these shock waves, because this is a major source of the drag. and how do you manipulate these waves to go away from the vehicle, how to ensure that these waves don't interact with a fighter aircraft or a launch vehicle or a space shuttle, is something which has made shock waves an integral part of aerospace for a long time. But then in the recent times, yes, this has broken the barriers of aerospace and entered into every branch of science and engineering. In fact, one of the things that normally happens is artificial diamonds could be made in the lab using shock waves, and massive deformation in the material is still a very important area of research in the design of, say, bulletproof jackets or bulletproof shelters and several things. In fact, the last mass extinction that took place, people still believe a massive meteorite would have completely destroyed the underground or the underwater aquatic life. So even in intergalactic space, learning about these shock waves is very important, because they believe whenever new stars are born, you will have these kind of waves generated. So I just tried to put some pictures here which are there on the internet, captured by one of my collaborators from NASA. You can actually see a fighter aircraft 338 bomber, and it is traveling at about, say, 1,000 kilometers per hour. You can see these waves which are naturally formed ahead of it. And if the pressure is low in this region, pressure would be extremely high in the region which is actually next to that. So this region would have high pressure and high temperature. So this red color, yellow color denotes high temperature. And that is why for aerospace people, we would like to know the strength of the shock, where it is going, because this is a very, very potential source of all fluid mechanic phenomena in the branch of aerospace engineering. And the design is done in such a manner that these waves usually stay away from the main body. And even in your space shuttle, if you recall the Kalpana Chawla's accident, you will have a very blunt shock, which usually produces the fourth state of matter. But of course, in nature, you have several things. If a cannon burst, you can see a shock. In fact, the new galaxies, when they are formed, you will have a shock. Oppenheimer, in his classical experiment, when the nuclear explosion took place, they usually tore a few pieces of paper, and the particle velocity was actually recorded in the camera. So if you know the radius of these waves, you can actually figure out what is the strength of the nuclear explosion. So this is something very, very physical. So this is not exclusive property of aerospace engineering, but rather when you have a very large energy being dissipated in a very, very small time, shock waves are one of the most preferred form of energy dissipation in nature, like a cannon burst. In fact, tsunami that takes place below the, under the seabed, or the volcanic eruption, earthquake, wherever massive energy dissipation is involved, or the cylinder burst, hydrogen-oxygen explosion, all of them are sources of shock waves. Whenever you have large energy, this is one of the common form. In fact, a new star, when it is formed, you will have shock waves which could travel at about 50 kilometers per second in the outer space. It's a tremendous amount of energy that is involved in many of these things. But you may be wondering that this is not only so destructive. If you are very careful, you can actually look at shock waves which can be generated using a simple whip. And this is like a hunter, what is used by people in the circus. Of course, nowadays this generation would not really see a circus. But even today in a circus, the hunter cannot actually hit the animal with the whip. But what he does is he just moves it in air. One of my German friends very beautifully recorded the shock wave that you can see here. And this is going to come in because the cross section here is very thin compared to the end of the whip that the hunter is holding. And the shock, when it goes through the body of the tiger or lion, it gets frozen. Usually shock waves have a very wide frequency content, starting from, say, 18 hertz to 24 hertz, which is usually regarded as infrasonic, all the way up to, say, a few tens of kilohertz. So this small infrasonic frequency, when it goes through our body, that's why when tiger roars, you get frozen. Our body is completely with liquids. As a result, you will have resonance, and that is why you usually, when you are shocked, the word is used in that context. Or you are listening to a very good musical concert, you will have goosebumps. Or you enter a very ancient temple, you suddenly feel positive vibration. That's because there are frequencies which are emanating in the infrasonic content. So you can actually generate a shock using your hand. In fact, if you are very curious about nature, there is this shrimp which is called as a pistol shrimp by popular people. They reside very deep in the sea, and they have two pairs of claw here, and then they can move at such rapid speed, almost up to about 100 kilometers per hour. As a result, the liquid gets trapped, and then there is a small cavitation that happens. And when that cavitation bubble bursts, it actually creates a shock wave. And the sound it makes it almost similar to the way you will have pistol being shot by somebody below the sea. In fact, the sound is so loud that submariners, many a time, they get misguided by a huge swarm of these pistol shrimp. That is why the word pistol is given. In fact, there is a group in Norway who have actually visualized the cavitating bubble. They have even visualized the shock wave that emanates from the movement of the claw of a pistol shrimp. So friends, the shock wave is omnipresent. It's not something which is exclusive of aerospace. It's worthwhile for all of us to really see how shocking it is. Indeed, yes, it is shocking. This is a view of our laboratory which you have in IASC. So I would welcome those of you who are interested to come and take a look at this, because this is emerged as an international hub of activities in not just aerospace, but in almost all areas of science and engineering. And I'm also very happy and proud to say on this occasion that everything that you see, several devices that we have built, these are all called shock tubes, shock tunnel. You will find plenty of them around this lab. And all of them are made within the country by several of my students and earlier collaborators. So this is like a truly Atmanirbhar Bharat. And we haven't actually imported anything other than few laser systems, high-speed cameras in recent times. But we make our own thin film sensors, we build our own pressure transducers, and all these facilities are built by us brick by brick. And today this is actually regarded as the largest lab of its kind in the entire world in the area of shock waves. So we are also very proud about that, and we have several visitors from abroad. And incidentally, our startup company has also built several shock tubes which have been exported. So we have built an experimental facility at University of Mississippi. We have given small shock tubes to South Korea. We have also given another one to University of Texas at Austin, which they are using for their research and training purpose. It's a proud moment that a device made in India has found way in a Western university of repute. And Dr. Kalam visited us and started the Center of Excellence in 2011. And we also do a lot of work in hypersonics because that is our bread and butter. So these waves can be generated by several means in the laboratory. So even if you have a compressed air in one region, you suddenly open it either using a rupture disk or a valve, then you will usually have a shock wave which propagates. In fact, there are several facilities that you would see in IASC, and it would be an understatement to say that when we began this activity probably 30 years ago, we just had one shock tube that you see here. And for doing our experiments in those days, we did not have much of money, but we ended up putting money from our PF, from our pocket, struggled. But today, this lab is worth crores of rupees. So we have a lot of facilities which is being used by not just IAC people, but even people from abroad as well as other parts of India. So shock tubes are one of the most common means by which these waves are generated in the laboratory. And in fact, if I have something like, I don't know if you're able to see this movie. So if I have a compressed air following, you can see a front here, and that is nothing but a shock wave. You can create them in 2 mm tube, 6 mm tube, all kinds of things are possible today. In fact, you have several tubes like that in the world where an entire army truck can actually go in, and they use this for testing whether a truck can withstand blast waves. In fact, I am now building one of the largest shock tubes for the DRDO very close to Delhi, where they can test structures which are used for mine protection systems, underbelly of a truck, or the armor plates and things like that. So there are several tubes. People have built even micro shock tubes. You can build a shock tube in a syringe, or you can build it as big as what you see in, say, United States, where an entire truck or a 3-story building model can be put inside. So this shock tube is like a test tube for gas dynamics people. So we have several of them in the lab, and we generate these kind of Freelander profile, which again for a few milliseconds. And we can do this in liquid, we can do this in solids. In fact, the recently commissioned facility, we can generate pressure up to the tune of 5,000 bar. So very tremendously large pressure for a short duration, or something like 150 microseconds and things like that. Then using these kind of mechanical impulse embedded in them, you can actually come back and do all kinds of interesting experiments in the laboratory. In fact, we can even create TNT equivalent explosions in the lab without using explosives. So that's the beauty of these kind of facilities. If your university is interested, we would be very happy to initiate some research in some of these frontier areas. In fact, this facility is again very unique, where you can utilize this to understand how blast waves propagate in, say, sand, for example. This is now a big ongoing program with DRDO, because if you want to build a new type of bunkers, then you need to know. So we have several facilities like this. So I will not get into details. I'll just show you one movie where we can generate very large pressure impulse. So this is a small tube. In fact, this is a very long tube. If you could like to see, it's almost close to 9 meters. And if I have a small diaphragm or a valve, I can generate close to 2,500 bar for a very, very short time. It's almost like bursting a small cracker. You would really see, my experiments are all over within a millisecond. So that is the reason why you need a lot of good diagnostics. In fact, in recent time, one of the big hot topics that everybody is talking about today, after the recent Ukraine war, is a glider missile like this. In fact, China succeeded in building a missile of this nature, and then the beauty or the danger of this missile is that they are launched from the ground, but then they can go outside the Earth's atmosphere, and then they start hovering around at close to 13 miles per hour in 100, 400 miles, very where you can't detect. And then they keep gliding, and then they can come down at the will and can wreak havoc. And in fact, they demonstrated this. Russia also claims they have done, and in fact, incidentally, this year alone, United States has spending close to $4.2 billion on hypersonic. So this is the most happening area, and luckily when we started work in this area maybe 25 years ago, we had no takers. I mean, not many programs were there in the country. So I would urge anybody who want to dream big, please dream big, and you must be mad about your own area. If you are not falling in love with your own research area, I don't think the others would get excited with what you're doing. Luckily, after so many years now, we have good technical, intellectual base in the country. And India is also planning to build a hypersonic missile system. And going anywhere in the world in 1.5 hours is the motto of many of these systems, where you may have an engine like scramjet engine without any rotating parts. So this is one of the big holy grail, if I can use the word. And so far, the longest duration for which people have demonstrated this appears to be about 200 seconds. And these engines are very special. So they will be below a body here, but then they will not carry any air, unlike the rocket system where both air and fuel are carried. So this will take atmospheric oxygen and the fuel is injected, and they would burn, and there would be auto ignition behind the high temperature where the shock waves reflect in a rectangular duct. So this is a very unusual engine where there are no rotating parts. So this is just a duct where there are a series of shock waves, and the temperatures go so high that the fuel burns, and the combustion takes place at supersonic speed, velocities which are more than the speed of sound, giving you tremendous thrust. So one of the thing is they're thinking of having, maybe by the turn of century, you will have a flying object which can take you from Bangalore to Delhi in 15 minutes, Tokyo to New York in 2 hours. But whether we would be able to withstand such high G levels, we do not know. But reusable launch vehicles, space tourism, these are all areas where air-breathing engine is going to play a big important role. ISRO and DRDO are having big programs. We also have large-scale research programs. Fundamentally, this is very rich in intellectual content. But then I would like to show you some very quick glimpse. I will take you through several things to demonstrate very often people think you need big money, big facility to start any research program. This is true, especially with institutes. But I must tell you, when we began in 1995, we did not have a single funded project. We did not have any diagnostic. We had no money, but then we had dreams. Two of us joined together, me and my senior colleague, Professor Reddy, who is superannuated, and then we said, I still remember what Dr. Kalam mentioned in those days when I was a young research scholar in the early 90s. And he said, show me a shock wave in these kind of facilities called shock tunnels. Because shock tunnel is almost like a wind tunnel, but my test time is only 1 millisecond, 1,000th of a second. And 1 second itself is so small. Who will believe 1,000th of a second? And at that time, Dr. Kalam said, show me a shock wave and I will believe such experiments can be done. But I had no Schlieren system, no money to buy. And then we came up with this indigenous idea where we stuck electric discharge. So we embedded an electrode in a model and we put an electrode in the top of a test section. And we struggled for almost about 6 to 8 months. And although we did not have money, this entire circuitry costed about 50,000 rupees. And we borrowed some money from some of the colleagues who were very generous to give us some money. And I borrowed the camera from my brother. Then someone coming from United States gave us the high-speed film. And we used to do these experiments in the night because we couldn't afford building an electronics to do electronic triggering and synchronization of the camera. We didn't have high-speed camera. So we did the experiment. It used to start at 8 o'clock and end at 3 o'clock in the morning. And after 6 months of struggle, I got this first photograph where I could see a proper shock wave over a flat plate, which actually resembles, a wing of an aircraft. And then, of course, it came out in the cover page, and the rest is history from that point onwards. Dr. Kalam was so fascinated about this. And when he visited IASC to inaugurate our centers of excellence, I actually showed him this photograph that we took way back in early 90s by spending 55,000 rupees versus this movie where you can actually see the flow over a space shuttle kind of an object in the laboratory where the shock is very clearly seen. This high-speed camera costed about 55 lakhs in those days, but now the cost has actually come down. So the journey from 55,000 to 55 lakhs is not about money, my dear friends, but it is all about the dream and the passion and the unexplainable joy that I really derived when I got this first picture, when I developed this we used to cut the film in the morning and develop it in a special purpose, studio in those days. But of course, from that point onwards, we have actually moved on. In fact, when Dr. Kalam saw this movie, he was so excited. He was staring at this for 15 minutes. But then it took us about 15 years to reach there, from 95 to 2010. And then the rest is history. So we are today one of the 7 labs in the world where we can generate the entire re-entry flow, plasma flow in the lab. Because it's very difficult to solve plasma dynamics using Navier-Stokes equation. Mathematically, this is quite complicated. But we can generate these kind of flows in the lab and measure all kinds of parameters, including the spectrum, including the temperature. So these are conditions which are typical of Kalpana Chawla's accident. And in fact, space shuttle enters the Earth's atmosphere at a very high velocity because there is no drag in the outer space. But when it comes into the Earth's atmosphere, there is a very thick atmosphere. And that is why the kinetic energy gets converted into heat energy. And there is a massive temperature ahead of the space shuttle. And that is why we use what are called as thermal protection system. And one of those ceramic tiles had loosened up, and that is the reason why we had that unfortunate accident. Almost all the programs of ISR was starting from Gaganyaan and many programs in the next few years, they are all in hypersonic regime. Little did we realize what we started purely as a personal passion several decades ago is actually benefiting the country today with several of our students being there in several IITs. And what started off as a passion of 2 people in the Shockwave Society, today we have more than 400 members, and our work is also recognized internationally. And I head the Shockwave Institute, which has representations from 40 different countries around the world. And hypersonic is a very interesting area. I will not delve into details of this because I understand that this is a multifarious crowd. But to tell you that we are looking at scramjet, which is a very important point, and we need to understand how to build an engine. We have to look at materials. We have to look at electronics, because novel control systems become very important. High temperature materials, chemical kinetics, how does the fuel mix in these kind of speed? How do you design a novel surface to get into this? So these are all some very, very innovative, unknown questions, which is actually propelling researchers the world over. This is truly a multidisciplinary subject. And this is also one thing that I want to highlight here. Any big problem that you want to solve today in any area, my dear friends, please join hands. And I would urge even your university to break the shackles of department. Don't have mechanical engineering, that engineering, everything is one. Please form clusters and address some important problems which are plaguing the society. Because society doesn't understand science. Society only recognizes the outcome of technologies, which are nothing but products which make their life easy. So hopefully, if India can build a hypersonic missile which can actually act like a deterrent, then if the country is protected, then society feels, yes, it is worth the investment that we have made over the years into the important area of hypersonic. So we have several programs, like we try to understand the shock interactions. Alas, I never thought such experiments could be done in our own country when we began work several decades ago. But now we are able to do that. You can actually see the oscillation over an aerospike, and this is in fact used in the Trident missile. We are also now able to measure the temperature around the entire re-entry bodies. We are using a simple ordinary camera using 2-temperature pyrometry. We are able to understand shockwave boundary layer interaction, several things, including the mixing phenomena and things like that. In fact, this is one of the holy grail that I told you. How does a scramjet engine start and unstart is a big, big question. In fact, IASC has one of the optically accessible scramjet engine. So this is a demonstration of scramjet working in IASC. So we are very happy that we are able to pass on many of these technologies and then spearheading the research endeavors in this area. And we are also able to measure the entire temperature around the re-entry capsule using an ordinary camera. So these are all some very exciting areas in which we are working. And recognizing this, Dr. Kalam took initiative, and in fact, he handed over a check of 5 crores to our director. In fact, Professor Acharya would recognize Professor Balki here. And he's such a pioneer. Then he took the check on behalf of IASC, and then he pulled one of the youngsters who happened to be me, and then dumped this entire program on my head in 2011. And luckily from there, we have come a long way to build several technologies. So we have scientists from BrahMos who work with us. So we have been able to build a very critical part of hypersonic system. So now country is embarking on a single program in hypersonic to be spearheaded by DRDO. Of course, several facilities have been used, including new thermal coating. Physics is important, chemistry is important. That's why I keep urging fundamental science is the foundation cornerstone on which new technology or engineering solutions can emerge. Please do not neglect basic physics, chemistry, and mathematics and biology. And being a university, you should give as much force on basic sciences, because only from basic science, new information, new technologies, new engineering solutions can actually emerge. We are also looking at how you can mix two fluid streams. With all the advancement, when the flow streams move at hypersonic speed, we cannot understand how do they mix. So there is a big program which is spearheaded by my younger colleague, Dr. Srisha Rao, who is looking at how do you really look at supersonic mixing. In fact, supercritical carbon dioxide has emerged as a big fluid now, which is getting into power industry, oil extraction industry. But how does the supercritical carbon dioxide expand in an ejector system, which is so very important when you design a very small power plant? In fact, supercritical carbon dioxide, once it succeeds, you can bring down the size of your power plant to probably a tabletop level, because these fluids are capable of holding up a large enthalpy. So there's an exciting work that goes on in the area of supersonic mixing. The basic physics, where you would have heard about Mie scattering, Rayleigh scattering, particle image velocimetry, planar laser-induced fluorescence, all of that is actually used to understand the very intricate dynamics associated with laminar turbulent transition, shear layer breakup, and so on and so forth. We also do a lot of chemistry. People think, what is the use of chemistry? But in scramjet engine, chemistry is the only important bottleneck that, in fact, Chinese have now built a huge, spending $60 million only to understand the non-equilibrium chemistry associated with supersonic burning. And in the lab, we have a chemical kinetic shock tube, and my own colleague from inorganic and physical chemistry, which again happens to be the parental department of Professor J.C. Bose, who went and started IIT Kharagpur. And we have students from inorganic and physical chemistry who work very closely with us to understand ignition delay and chemical kinetics of most of these fuel which is used in scramjet engine. So please don't neglect chemistry, because I need to know what kind of reactions actually take place. If these engines run for, say, 400 seconds, what is the origin of soot formation? How do I really make sure the soot is less? Are there any combustion instability at those kind of speed? Well, we don't have answers. We only are finding out there are more questions than answers compared to the last 25 years of our journey. This is when we asked a question, is shock waves really a boon or a bane? Because for the first 15 years, we were very closely working with ISRO and DRDO based on our design. ISR Vostar built a huge complex. In fact, a 300 crore complex has been built in VSSC, where they have a wind tunnel, shock tunnel, all stemming out of the work that was happening in IASC in the 90s and the 2000s. And we thought that what is shockwave after all? It is just release of energy. Why can't we really look at other areas? So this particular tree, which was drawn by one of my students, virtually highlights the importance that is there in every branch of science and engineering. We can today put a DNA inside a cell using shockwave. We can also break the rock, the shale rock, which is at a depth of 1.5 kilometers, to extract oil. That's the power of this particular area. And if your university is looking for new area, please get into this, because this is going to revolutionize several things in the coming years. I'll just take you through a glimpse of application. I'll not get into the science, but if some of you are interested, we can always discuss on that. From air blast are very important today to understand, because the soldiers who are in the battlefield, they are always exposed to very low intensity of blast wave. And I do understand you have a medical school, and there is an important area called trauma-induced brain injury. And this is not very well understood. So some of the soldiers or even the policemen who are in the border areas, even though they wear the bulletproof jackets and headgear, low intensity blast wave reduces the blood flow in arteries by about 30%. And you usually club it under the so-called disease of depression and so many things. But understanding blast-induced brain injuries is very critical. So now we have built facilities. In fact, so much so we had a collaboration with National Institute for Mental Health in Bangalore. During Diwali days, they burn very loud noise crackers. And we did a very interesting animal experiment a few years ago. Even small 1 or 2 exposure to some cracker, which is similar to the decibel level experienced by, say, atom bomb, that you usually like, is enough to hurt the cognitive abilities of child who are between the age of, say, 8 years to 12 years. So this is actually dangerous. So we have started educating people. You need to understand the basic energy transfer mechanism associated with a single mammalian cell and shockwave. That is why medical field has become very important. Today we have started clinical trials. So if you have a medical school and an engineering school, shockwave is the area to really work with. And blast injuries, we know very little today. In fact, if I can understand what happens to a mammalian cell, I think that would be worth gold in today's constituent. Any shock which is actually beyond about, say, 0.7 bar is enough to rupture your eardrum. And in fact, what is happening in the long-term effects of shockwave exposure, we have no clue. Like even the degeneration of axons is a big important part. How does the lungs react to these things? So these are some exciting areas. We are not working on all of them, but I'll show you some glimpses of what we are doing. And this is actually a very tiny shock wave that I generated several years ago using some explosives, something like few milligrams of high melt explosive. And you can say that this is, if a Pokhran blast is 150 kiloton, our laboratory were hypersonics and shockwave research blast for 100 picoton, negligible amount of energy, something like less than a joule of energy. But you get a similar shock wave that you get in a large explosion. Now, this first one that you see here is the shock, and the subsequent one are the acoustic wave. And if you use this to load a small diaphragm, then the energy can be transferred. And then you can do lot more interesting thing using these kind of waves. In fact, the first one that we did was to put vaccine into the human body and below the skin using these kind of shock waves. And what is very interesting is all of us, none of us like needles. And needle, when you poke it below your skin, usually it goes to a depth of about few millimeters. But whereas in these experiments, we targeted what are called as Langerhans cell. And in these cells, if you're able to deliver vaccine, they are free-floating cells, so they absorb vaccines quicker. And the amount of vaccine that you really need to pump into the body is 1/10 of what you normally need by the needle route. Pharma companies won't be very happy about it, but that is the harsh reality. So we had a small tube where I generate a shock wave, and then using a small liquid cartridge and a metal foil, I can actually generate a very sharp jet of, like an injection, which has got a region of about 300 millimeter. And then we have done some very exhaustive experiments. So this is something which is now currently being tried out as a methodology for infant vaccine delivery, as well as people who are very old in ICUs, where you cannot poke needle because the body is so fragile. And this is something which happened with the collaboration of biology, my colleague, Professor Deepshika Chakravarti. So sometimes in big universities, when you are put in committees, it is actually good. And both of us were in some committee, and I started talking to her over a cup of coffee. And luckily, this collaboration has lasted last 15 years, and we have graduated a couple of PhD students. So biology and aerospace engineering can actually shake hands, and you can come up with something very unique. But please remember, for any interdisciplinary work, I am not going to learn biology, and even if I try, I will only be very superficial. We should learn to respect each other's strength. We should learn to respect each other's science. When you shake hand like this, wonderful innovations actually will come out. Please make sure that the synergy between your medical school, veterinary school, dental school with engineering and science school. Of course, law and humanities are also very important, whether it is patent protection or business strategy to commercialize this into the market. Nothing is superior, nothing is inferior. That is really important. So we ended up using the similar system to put a DNA inside a naked plasmid cell. Cell transformation is a very important area where biologists would like to transform cells, put the desired DNA. In fact, using this, we have been able to transform several kinds of cell. We ended up building different kinds of system to, generate the shock wave. Here we ended up using hydrogen-oxygen mixture. Recently, we have used piston impact on a liquid surface to generate very tiny amount of energy. And then this also has helped us to come out with new type of devices which could be useful in biomedical area. So much so, I never thought one day I will measure the Young's modulus experienced by a bacteria. Bacteria like E. coli, which is not even few microns, if it is exposed to a shock wave with something like say 80 to 90 bar pressure for about 140 microseconds, you kill them. But then if the pressure is lower, it actually elongates. And that's a very interesting how such a tiny microorganism can actually get elongated. You could see here in the transmission microscopy a very long E. coli. For about half an hour, it remains like that. And then it comes back to its original shape. This has actually led us getting into some very interesting analogies in applications in andrology and things like that. So we determined the Young's modulus of bacteria. I never thought, being a mechanical engineer, one day I will measure the Young's modulus of bacteria. So keep your ears, eyes open. I think there is a lot to be learned in the fascinating world of shock waves. In fact, I never thought in a shock tube I will put up an animal like mice one day. And interestingly, if you infect this with, say, Salmonella bacteria, you exposed it to shockwave, the immune protection system becomes better. Maybe who knows, one day when you walk into a doctor's clinic, you will get a low dose of shock, which actually triggers your natural immunosystem, your ability to react to any foreign onslaught or microbial attack. So we ended up putting a small animal in a shock tube, but now I'm actually building a very big system for the DRDO to do TBI, where they want to use these blast waves and understand how trauma-induced brain injury happens on primates. So a lot of interesting cases where we built new facilities to exactly mimic blast waves that are happening in the real field, came up with new facilities. We are able to do animal experiments without anesthesia, which is a big step forward. And what is shown out of all of this is that shock waves indeed actually induce immune protection. We are also now trying to understand several biophysical pathways with the help of our collaborators in Department of Biochemistry. That probably is one of the beauties of IAC, because you have science which is so strong, you can go and knock the doors. So I think I am sure that would happen even with the new university that you are in. One day, I think we should learn to work in clusters. You also mentioned you have a dentistry college. I think root canal treatment and dental biofilms are a very hot area. And we ended up building a very small endoscopic device, and we are able to disrupt dental biofilms. And root canal treatment may become very easy. So we haven't still tried this out in humans, but then we have done the human biofilm and made sure we did an animal experiment. And then very interestingly, shockwave is actually doing wonders. So maybe you may have a painless root canal treatment in few years from now. I'm actually open to collaborating with dentists. We have already started some work in this direction. And we are also looking at, I told you, the biofilm disruption. Dental biofilm is very, very hard. That is why they pump in a lot of anesthesia and antibiotics, especially when there is a decay and a root canal treatment. We have also looked at some very unusual thing, like sandalwood is specific to Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, and a few ml of sandal oil is probably worth thousands of rupees today. It is used in for perfumery. It is also used in pharma industry and medical field. But if you just expose the sandalwood to shock wave, the oil comes to the surface so quickly. So what used to take by conventional solvent extraction close to 15 hours, now we are able to do in 15 minutes. Incidentally, this is also useful for other essential oils. We have also looked at a small metal plate using shock waves. So we now have collaborations with materials engineering group, where we are trying to understand the fundamental Miller indices and how these structures keep changing. So these are also very interesting. So you end up building new devices to generate shock waves. In fact, I have not shown it here. The new system, what we have built, is able to go up to 5,000 bar in a liquid medium. And a couple of my colleagues from materials department are going to understand how a new piezo material or a conventional zinc material react to such large transients. So these are very interesting things. Of course, at this point in time, don't always use the question, what is the use of this? No information when you are learning for the first time, you should be worried about the application. Application can happen at a later date. In fact, theoretical physicists said a monolayer of carbon will be the strongest material in 1928. But we were able to build graphene only in 2003. And Nobel Prize was awarded to Andre Grim in 2008 or so in Manchester along with Nocellier. It may take a generation for you to realize the dream, but that is possible only when we understand fundamental science. Many things we don't even know what is the use. In fact, I still remember a couple of our own colleagues in the aerospace department, when few of us looking at drones maybe 15 years ago, they said, what is the use of drones? Don't work in those areas. But today drones are all over the place. We can never predict the evolution of a foundational science through the metamorphic engineering design to a product. So we do not know what is going to be the use of all these things, but then some of them have found application. I'll just wrap it up here in the last few minutes to tell you that one of the big bottlenecks that we have in our country is to realize good knowledge and good money can actually go together. Ma Saraswati and Ma Lakshmi can reside in the same house. Young professors, young faculty members, if you say you have taught a particular subject, you have done research, then that knowledge should be converted into useful things for the society. At least some of us can go through this entire journey of science, engineering, and technology. And we should learn to dream, design, deliver, and make money. Making money is no longer a bad word. You may file a patent, patent may be granted, but what is the use of the patent? You should earn your salary. We should actually make more money than somebody who is, say, in a real estate. I have nothing against any field. But if you say you have done PhD, you have spent 30 years, you have produced papers, I think that knowledge at some point in time, we should look at how you can make it useful and how you can make somebody pay for it. And this is what we decided maybe in 2011 that we will start our own startup company. And again, this great man, Swami Vivekananda, gave an inspiration. He said, you should take risk in your life. If you win, you can lead. If you lose, you can guide. Anyway, as professor, I had already guided about 15 PhDs. So I thought we had nothing to lose. So along with my senior colleague, we ended up starting this company called Superwave Technology. Of course, now there are a few more companies, and I also mentor a couple of them now. And then we ended up making several products. In fact, this product that you see is called Super Bull, which is a direct application in veterinary science, where we can do artificial insemination in cows. We have tried this out on more than 15,000 cows. And the insemination rate has shot up from the existing 30-40% to almost 60%. More cows getting, they're able to give birth would mean more milk production. So we want to herald the next milk revolution using this device called Super Bull, which actually uses a tiny shock tube. And we have converted an existing Super Bull gun into a nano mist generating device. And it is also less harmful to the cow, because some of you who are in veterinary science would know that usually whenever you use an artificial insemination gun, you need to push it till the uterus of the cow, and it hurts. It makes a lot of bleeding is observed, and the cow usually jumps all around the place. So we are able to build a device, and hopefully we would make money. We haven't made big money till date, but we haven't lost money either. We haven't borrowed money either. We have about 20 people. Good thing is a couple of our own students have taken entrepreneurship. So our PhD students are spearheading. This is another device which we have built for wound healing in diabetic patients. It can heal any kind of wound. It promotes angiogenesis. So controlled shock waves actually promotes angiogenesis. This is another device which is going to be very revolutionary. I am betting big time on this. So this came out during the COVID, where we don't use shockwave, but then we use conventional mechanical engineering to build an artificial liver. Currently, animal trials in pigs is underway. Once that is done, we are going to seek emergency approval, and then probably we will tie up with few hospitals to try it out on patients to cure acute liver failure without any transplant. So this is a major shift. In fact, the tea industry, is also working with us. So I presented the tea, which is actually treated with shockwaves, to our Honorable Prime Minister. I can never forget his remark was, "Chai se hamara bahut purana talukat hai," and the tea actually tastes better. And this is one such device. More polyphenol basically comes to the surface. So during the withering time, we usually use them. And polyphenol percentage goes up by almost 30%. That means more antioxidants. So two of these devices are now working in tea factory. I don't know if this. So the tea bags which go in are given a dose of shock, and then the whole thing. So we are able to move from laboratory to land, and it's an exciting time for us. Hopefully, we will also make some money. So one of the target we are kept is, before we retire, we need to make at least about 100 crores and go home. And this is another device. It's a very important one called bamboos. I am sure most of you would know. If you don't treat them with preservatives, and you can't use them for building construction to several other applications. So we are able to treat round bamboos, long bamboos, using shockwaves. So this is a very new technology which we have deployed 2 such units in Nagpur and other areas. So this is another product which is actually yet to be marketed, but we are already in the protection. So this is one big system where I never thought one day I will send a shock tube below the ground at a depth of 1.5 kilometers. With the help of ONGC, we did this work, and this technology is about 80% developed. So we are able to break shale rock using shock waves, hopefully, but some more work is required in this before we can replace hydrofracking. And this is at one extreme level, but other level, we have a wound healing device. And this device is now currently under clinical trials. I'm so happy that we are able to mitigate the pain in people. In fact, some limited trials have shown this actually promotes shockwave use, promotes angiogenesis. So that is the one which is actually, there's an avalanche of calcium resulting in faster wound healing without any medicine. So this is, with this we believe is going to play a revolutionary role in several different areas. But friends, I think I will stop here. But before I stop, please remember that any of these kind of work is not a work of one individual. It is a saga of continuous sacrifice, of passion. I won't call it as a hard work because I have never believed in hard work in my life, because we all do things what we like and what we love. And when you do what you like and what you love, there is nothing called very hard. So all the people we have seen, a large battery of students, we have about 65 strong group, faculty from 18 departments with several universities abroad. And one common thing that I've always learned is if you want to walk fast, you can walk alone. But if you want to walk far, you should learn to work together. And that is something very, very vital in a university setup. Yes, shockwave started off from aerospace, but today it is touching the raw nerves of medical fraternity to dental surgeons to neurosurgeons. In fact, we have built a device which is being now used in Chitra Tirunal Institute to break aneurysm, the brain tumors. And the sky is the limit in many of these applications. We also have a startup company. Hopefully one day we will make money, but then we want to propagate this culture of shockwaves across the country. In fact, we do hold workshops in the area of shockwaves in nook and corner of this country. And my colleagues from chemistry and biology also join. We have an Indian Society for Shockwave Research. I urge you and welcome you to the fold. This year's National Shockwave Symposium will be held in Ahmedabad. Physical Research Laboratory is actually hosting it. What started off as a passion for my senior colleague, Professor Reddy, this is Professor Arunan, this is Professor Jairam in materials, and this is Dr. Saravanan. So many of them you will see in this crowd. Today, as we are able to spread across the department, my younger colleague, Dr. Srisha, Satyam. So I take this opportunity to thank all my funding agencies, private industries, BrahMos, DRDO, everybody. This is Professor Deepshika Chakravarti. So I would like to acknowledge the role played by each and every one of my students. Being professors, this is the only privilege we enjoy. We give lectures as if we have done the work. But we should not become I specialists. We are all we specialists. I think, Professor Acharya, I would stop here and I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much. Hope it was not too long and boring.
No, absolutely. It was very, very interesting. I think it should really encourage many of our colleagues here to do collaborative work.
This is Tripathi here. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go on, sir.
Dr. Jagadeesh, I just wanted to know whether the sonic booms, what you use in submarines as a defense strategy, that also is a kind of a weapon which is using shock waves, and it was discovered quite a few years back. What is the present development, and how is the defense using it, if you know?
You are very right. It is also kind of, blast wave only. But only question is currently in water, the challenges are fundamental level. We do not know the equation of state in salt water. So we only have a modified Tate's equation of state. But then the devices like torque busters have actually now got into the business where they are able to do underwater explosion in a very controlled manner. People are also trying to generate very controlled blast waves in water to guard against the coastal effects. And these are also being generated by green hydrogen and oxygen burning. So still, I wouldn't say that all of them have become routine in military application, but underwater explosions are now being used left, right, and center for destructive and protective purpose. But still, there are most of them are using explosives, which is actually going to be very detrimental to aquatic life. So people are looking at more green explosives in underwater explosion. Gaseous explosions using hydrogen so that when it burns, it doesn't give away any byproducts. But other than Tate's equation of state, we still do not know the correct equation of state in water. So that's the challenge.
I'm Paritosh Tyagi. May I ask a question?
Yeah, please, sir, go on.
Well, I must first say that your talk left us in a sort of trauma. So you can study also. Your talk left most of us in a state of trauma. That is why questions came up after some time. Now I have a question. The question is, somebody also is.
I hear some background sound. I don't know who it is. But go on, sir. I can hear you.
Okay. Professor Jagadeesh, your experimentation with the coliforms gives us hope that this technique can be used for disinfection of water and also in the application of sewage treatment and effluent treatment in a very clever manner. And lot of work has to be done before some practices can be evolved on those lines. Are you moving in that direction also?
That's a very interesting point. In fact, we had a request very recently from a large fish market, where they wanted to basically use this to destroy all the bacteria after they sell the fish and things like that. But other than at this point in time, trying to very clearly understand what happens with E. coli, agrobacterium, and other bacteria, we have not really looked at disinfectant of water. But couple of our collaborators in state of Tamil Nadu have been able to do this in 1 liter and 2 liter kind of a can, where you have a shock generating device which has actually destroyed all the bacteria that is present. But then the sewage water treatment could be very challenging because there could be sediments, there could be other bacterial infections which are likely to be there. But intuitively, you are very right. It is a very clever way of doing. I just need a piston moving at speeds of say about 10 to 15 meters per second, which can impact on the sewage surface in a container. We will be in a position to create a very sharp shock which will kill all the bacteria in such a solution. But we haven't really done it on sewage water, but we have tried this on proper bacteria in tissue culture, small petri dishes, and also in a small tank. But it is worth exploring certainly.
Thank you.
Question. Madam Renu, is there anything in the chat box? Any question?
You are muted, man. You have to unmute yourself.
Please unmute. You are
You have to
muted.
unmute. Yeah. We're not able to hear you.
Sir,
You please unmute.
There was some problem with her microphone she was mentioning earlier.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
No problem.
Professor Nanda, you please check actually whether is there any other question? Any?
Sir, I think no, sir. There is no other question. Yes, there is no, sir. There is no other question on the chat box. Yes.
Okay. So now, before actually I request Professor Nanda, because Renu's microphone is not working, to propose a vote of thanks. I would just like to mention one or two small things. First of all, I must say, oh, here Professor Basu is there. Would you like to say something? Because you are also from IISc Bangalore.
Yeah, not much, but I was not there in the beginning of the lectures. Of course, I missed it in the beginning. But nice to see Professor Nanda here. And you just talked about it, and this obviously this is a very good initiative that is taken by you, Professor Damodar Acharya, and we all meet every alternate week almost, or every 2 weeks. And this INA chapter of Bhubaneswar with SOA and IMMT Bhubaneswar and other institutes together, IOP or NISA or IIT and KIIT and SOA, all of us together, we have a very good association and a seminar, webinar every alternate week. This is a very successful initiative by Professor Acharya, and I'm sure it's growing and it will be growing more. And we are going to have an annual session here at Bhubaneswar of INAE, Indian National Academy of Engineering, and that's a very good sign. And the gamut of speakers that we get every month, two speakers are, of course, are very well known in respective fields, and we really thankful to your initiative. Whatever we could do, we are doing, and I hope that it will be going on as going on now, and with larger initiative when we do physically some of the conference or workshops or seminars in near future. So thank you, sir.
Professor Basu, I must assure you that it will go on. Since all of us are together, definitely we will make it better and better.
Yes, sir.
So far as Professor Jagadeesh is concerned, he referred one thing which I didn't know at all. So, for example, this Mysore sandal soap, that actually patent is by Sir J.C. Ghosh, and he has actually established this. And for your information, Professor Jagadeesh, in a studies tour in my undergraduate days when I went to Bangalore, that one factory which I visited was actually Mysore sandal soap factory.
Oh, very good.
But I never knew that actually it is Sir J.C. Ghosh who is the brain behind this. Second important thing is that you are doing so important work so far as the sandalwood is concerned. Now, so far as our Puri temple is concerned, Jagannath temple is concerned, we require every year almost 200 kg of sandalwood. And that sandalwood is actually provided by the government of Karnataka. It is such a noble thing actually that we get from Bangalore. And so far as actually Sir J.C. is concerned, some of the things which he did in his days. For example, he started a high pressure technology laboratory in Kharagpur. Now, of course, it is closed, but it was also his, vision. He also started that how to extract oil from coal using Fischer-Tropsch technology. He had a pilot plant also. This was also a great visionary like him who could really do so many things during his very short tenure in IIT Kharagpur. So, the Professor Jagadeesh, it was such an interesting seminar today, and we find that there is a lot of commonalities, lot of areas where institutes like, let us say, SOA or KATE or IMMT, we could really collaborate with your group and work on the areas which are really very, very relevant, particularly to healthcare and other areas, including actually in bacteria removal and what our senior colleague, senior friend, Professor Paritosh Tyagi said, that even for sewage water treatment, it should be possible. We should be able to really do it, provided we work in a, collaborative fashion, as you have mentioned again and again. With these few things, let me really request Professor P.K. Nanda to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was really inspiring and kind of instilling a sense of confidence and also motivating lecture. And really, it is a lecture for success. For success. So this is kind of a lecture actually we had, and I think the domain Professor Jagadeesh covered is almost ubiquitous everywhere, ubiquitous around all the fields. So ubiquitous in the society, I can say. I think not only that, through his lecture, he could motivate to dream big, to think big, and also he has already inculcated the new education policies ethos that interdisciplinary research, transdisciplinary research is the kind of the go of the day to solve the societal problems. I think he has already done it and motivated it, and he's a good, I think, team leader because he could collaborate with many and join hands with many researchers, co-researchers in his own institute around the globe. And more so, he could start with a dream, and the dream is coming true. And started with very in a miniature, humble way, and now it is a gigantic, resulting in all facets of the knowledge economy, in a sense that he is able to create state of, he is able to create new knowledge, he is able to train the students, build the economy, and what not above all, he is sure that the knowledge and the learning has no end and it really benefits to the society. So one should not never worry that what I'm doing should benefit the society tomorrow. It may benefit society some other day. And very, very interesting lecture. And his lecture is very motivating for collaborative activities. And I'm sure I'll pass this information to our colleagues from medical science and dental science, particularly, and the health sector, which is coming as a big boom. I think he had a major contribution through these softwares. I think his group is well recognized in the globe. I'm sure, I'm proud that our own institute, our own Indian Institute of Science is making a carve in the globe where we are the leader and others are the follower. So here is a story which actually he could write of himself down the line only 30 years, and really a successful story and a research pioneer himself. Thank you very much for sharing your innovations, sharing your discoveries, sharing your lab experience, dream, and also helping the society at large. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing very interesting lecture, and really you are a good speaker and motivating speaker. On behalf of IML, on behalf of SOA and IME chapter, And on behalf of especially all the members who are present here, I extend my hearty thanks and I profuse thanks for sharing this information. Wish to listen to you more in future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Damodar Acharya, who is actually really inviting such eminent people, the experts in their field, motivators for young researchers. I thank Professor Sidhu Sutabasu, who is also with us in all the meetings, and thank all our highly distinguished members and participants, faculty colleagues. Thank Dr. Renu Sharma, who is coordinating the event all along, a nice right from the beginning, and entire team who is helping her. Thank you very much. Good night. It was really instilling and motivating. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Pranam. Good day.
So, Professor Jagadeesh, thank you very much for an excellent lecture. And
Pleasure,
on
sir.
behalf of actually this our group, we will send you by post a small memento as a token of appreciation. Okay,
Thank you.
please accept it. And physically, definitely we'll meet very soon and possibly discuss all the possibilities of how we can collaborate with your group.
Sure, definitely.
Thank
We'll do. Thank you, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Namaste.